let's get going then, Maggie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, when I first had this idea of talking to people who I'd encountered along the path, it wasn't a purely how should I say, sort of educational thing that I had in mind. It was also, putting a bit of myself into it, and also things that I felt were of relevance and interest in today's world. And I mean, you are the first family member, yeah, that I've talked to. I don't want it to be so sort of dominated by my own sort of personal things. But for me, it's really, really important talking about things like equality and you know. Discrimination and basically the iniquities of life, and so going through these kinds of topics, I kind of bring out what I think is also important in society. And you represent some, yeah, brilliance in this area, because of who you are and the way you do things. So yeah, would you like to sort of come back on it, or just tell us a bit about who you are?
Um, well, thank you very much for saying that. I always a bit surprised whenever you say it, that you're always so kind and supportive and generous with your compliments. Um, so I, well, who am I? I'm just a pretty much an ordinary person, the daughter of immigrants, first generation. I wasn't born in this country, um, but went to school in this country. So what do you want me to expand on? My education or my career?
uh, yeah, who you are, the things that are important for you, essentially, and it will just, bounce ideas and bounce sort of conversational points
Yeah.
of the things that you find are important.
I guess who I am, when people ask me that, really, I never really identify as being English, certainly. So I'm a British person who has spent the majority of my life in the UK, um, but a foreigner nevertheless, and always sort of felt like a foreigner. So the things that the biggest impressions really of me not fitting in is probably what would be the most predominant thing that have impacted my life, really. We can start there, that's for sure. Not
Mm,
belonging. A definite overwhelming feeling of not belonging pretty much anywhere. And I think
mm.
that's quite common amongst young kids that grew up in the UK of immigrants.
I mean, I find that really interesting coming from somebody like you, because as as I've probably said, I don't know how many times, I find you as such a tower of strength. This sort of prevailing fortitude, which just continues to move forward. And um, yeah, I would never have considered the fact that you, yeah, perhaps felt in some ways as though that you didn't necessarily fit into the world around you immediately, in London or Windsor,
Reading.
Reading
Reading,
even.
right, you are.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a feeling of not belonging?
I'm a bit. I'm not sure actually, because I always felt quite settled wherever I was, whether that was with my friends at school, whether that was with the Armenian Scouts or the Armenian basketball team or my English football teams. Yeah, I don't know if that's because I'd never actually felt the pressure of representing anything other than me,
Yeah.
which seems, I don't know if that sounds strange, because as you know, I was quite involved in Armenian community, so people always used to say you represent, you know, this particular group or this particular idea and so on. But yeah, I still only felt, not in a selfish way, just it's just me, and my little bit that I contribute, nothing more.
No, but I love that, because basically what that really is interpreted to say is that you're comfortable in your own skin, and that sense of being comfortable in your own skin, which translates into confidence. Um, I'm really, really interested in that and how and who displays that. But you've always had that. I love that, and I'm almost envious of that. actually, because I've never had that.
I always see you as such a confident person. As in, you know, I see the first thing I see when I see you, you have a smile whenever you see friends and relatives. You have a smile for them. You've got, and and I'm pretty sure you get that smile from your mum. Yeah, because she no, because she had the same smile. Yeah, and when you saw that smile, it was a bit like, oh, I've come back to a familiar place. You know, and that in itself inspires confidence.
Well, I think what that is actually is approachability. So that's something I know that I do have inherently in me because just I would say, I mean, you can't, I suppose you can fake it. I guess you can fake it, but it doesn't last long. But
Mm,
I actually genuinely am interested in humans and whoever is in front of me. I'm genuinely interested in them as an individual, a person. And I do, when I ask a question, I actually do care what what I'm
mm.
listening to. So I suppose that can be faked because there are people that are good making conversation, but you can't fake it for long. Um, and so I know that there is a sense that when people meet me, they're comfortable and that I'm approachable. So I guess that might be what you're talking about. Confidence is different, though, I think,
Mm.
because just like you have a sense of yourself, so you basically you show up in a group or in an environment, and you don't have this need to have to prove anything. So that actually is a confidence. It can, like I can show up, but I immediately have a sense of lack when I show up. I have an inferiority complex, probably because I've been carrying that around with me all my life. That doesn't mean that I don't enjoy being at that place. I can certainly be enjoying myself, but still feel inferior.
That's yeah. I mean, it's a surprise. I mean, we have talked quite a bit about a number of different things, and I don't know, social ailments you can say, and in some cases, sort of psychological issues and stuff that people face, or
Yeah.
whatever was prevalent at the time. But I never ever thought that you were in any way lacking in confidence, and yeah, I mean, I, I guess different people interpret how they uh, feel, I guess, to how they perhaps, to the image that they perhaps project, and whether or not you have been well trained in projecting a certain sentiment, and yet at the same time, keeping within I suppose in this case you'd say insecurities. Um, it just makes it even more amazing what you do, and the way in which that you continue to do it, because you don't hide away. It's not as though
No. Yeah.
you're brave, you're in there, you're out there, you're battling away,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Because I think that a lack of confidence or an inferiority complex, they're different things, right? And then you have to add in social um, skills into the mix. I think I've always had social skills, right? And if you couple social skills with actual interest in people, then it's irrelevant whether you're feeling inferior or not in an environment. You can always connect with an individual,
mm,
right? So that authenticity of wanting to connect with that person could I suppose, could be misinterpreted as confidence, but actually, and in a way, it probably is actually when I think about it now, because in the context of, am I scared to speak to someone? No, I'm never scared of speaking to someone. So that could be interpreted as being confident. But do I feel like I am somehow inferior to that person that I'm speaking to? Yes, easily. I could easily. I mean, I feel inferior to you. I find you extremely intellectual, and the ability to assimilate information and understand it in a really confident way is something that I've never had. And so, in that context, I feel inferior to you. Is that a bad thing? No. I mean, I respect you for it, and I can. Um, what's the word? What's the word? I can respect you for it, and I can admire you for it. So it's not inferior in a negative way, but I know that I'm lacking it. So other people, for example, who don't appear to be confident, it could sometimes just be lacking social skills, and that could actually just be about practice.
Mm. Yeah.
So confidence is a very generic term, and I'm so keen to learn about it and people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm almost sort of bowled over because I in a big part of my education came from reading certain kinds of books. Essentially, these were books. The main one was a story called Zartong in Armenia, which is called The Awakening, and it talks about a period of revolution in the sort of late 19th century, and the main people who set themselves up to try to liberate the Armenians from Ottoman rule and from the horrors of that rule. What they did was they fundamentally said that the people, so this spiritual perhaps group of individuals who they didn't even know, were immediately elevated above them, and so all the work that they did was below and beneath the level of importance that this group of individuals represented.
Right.
And this served as my sort of educational basis for the work that I did in the Armenian community. So the way that I considered myself to be was essentially beneath all of the people with whom I had any interactions on the level of importance, because I thought, definitely to use a line from Star Trek, is in the many outweighs the
Right.
one or the few. Yeah, and in this case, I was the one. And it's interesting that you would have a similar, I suppose, approach to things, but perhaps on a completely different basis. I
That's a,
find it mad.
this is interesting actually, because is that a cultural thing, or is it so that humility, and also the serving people, basically, that that interest to serve people for the common goal of the people, that is it could that also be a socialist thing? So go on.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was going to say, in my case, yes, I agree with you. I think it is a socialist thing.
Yeah, yeah. But what's also interesting is that you were able to grasp that at a quite a young age, and you assimilated it into your purpose, your life purpose. And so actually you saw the value of being of servitude to the people, which actually is probably the most admirable quality in an individual, I think.
Yeah, you're definitely making me seem to be a lot better than than I am. Yeah, I am currently growing wings, and it's very hard for me to stay to stay.
We've always appreciated each other. I mean, but it's not I think this trend, I versus we, you know, I versus we, is a trend actually of thought, because especially with COVID, you know, everybody has had to make sacrifices for the common good, right? And actually, it's interesting how that's played out in all the different cultures around the world, and also fed into the stereotypes of the cultures of the world too. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And to be honest, if you think back to any individual incident where there has been human suffering, localized human suffering, the people around who were in a position to provide assistance without thought jump in and help. And I do remember, you could talk about the 7/7 bombings, you could talk about 9/11, you could talk about any number of other sort of public incidents. And they don't have to be necessarily terrorist in form. I remember there was once a train crash somewhere near Tesco's,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, everybody that was in Tesco's, whether they were workers or customers, they all ran out, taking food, water, medication, any kind of supplies just from the store that they could, to try to help the people that were there. And it was just amazing to see this unfold on, on
Interesting.
television. And
Mm,
it's just, no, there was no thought for it. It just had to happen.
mm.
So there is a lot of this a sort of empathy in human nature. It's just a shame that it so often requires a tragedy for it to surface.
Right, right. That's that's actually really that really is something that I think a lot about because I am constantly flabbergasted, if you want to use that word, at the lack of human empathy in day to day life, just normal, small, little things. Just having, just being able to understand that that person might be feeling this way or that way. And actually, it really bugs me because I sort of, I'm over empathetic to my detriment sometimes. Um, but I think that it is something that's become, I think the society is having a more of an awakening of that, and that could be again because of COVID, but it's actually also, I think, being driven by the trends in social, where everyone is becoming more aware of this cancel culture and the complete lack of empathy. um,
Mm,
Relating to that, because everybody becomes such sort of, what do they call them, keyboard warriors, and wanting to cancel each other out. But actually those people that are becoming very righteous online to try and cancel out what they consider to be very bad behavior are behaving equally as badly, and sometimes the extremes are, really causing some damage, proper damage. So there's lack of empathy on both sides, whether they're trying to cancel out what they think is to be wrong or right. All this judgment um, is all wrong on both sides.
mm. Yeah, and yet what is also in many ways, um, I suppose, to a difficult position to hold is the one in the middle where you don't have an opinion one way or the other. That is almost equally as yeah, yeah, problematic or troublesome to society as the extremes that exist on both sides.
That's true. I do that. That's such an interesting part, actually. Whether actually being neutral is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I
I
haven't
mean,
got an answer to that. I mean, I haven't got a thought about it yet.
hmm. I
To
mean,
be
I think
totally honest.
neutrality to a certain issue or another issue, that's fair enough. I mean, nobody is completely aware of all of the arguments, that exist for a specific issue,
Mm,
for every issue. But in general, apathy, where you see
yeah.
something unfolding and you think to yourself, no, that's too much for me to get involved in. I'll leave that, and you walk away from the person crying in the street.
But that's not
Um,
apathy, is it? I don't think you can call that apathetic. I think you can call it fearful. It's fear of getting involved, really, in that context, because you don't want to take on the consequences. But apathy is genuine indifference.
mm,
And that is when somebody is lacking, well, EQ, empathy, whatever you want to call it, or
mm,
they're narcissistic enough to say, well, it doesn't impact my life, so why should I get involved?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, or indeed, as you say, there is a difference, and perhaps even in some cases, a collection of the three, depending on the situation. It is troublesome, isn't it? But on the other hand, as you say, there have been these sort of social pushbacks, haven't there? As in, a couple of years ago with Harvey Weinstein, we had the Me Too.
Yeah.
Last year we had Black Lives Matter. At the same time, this COVID explosion has occurred. So, there is this shift to recognition of the need to create a more just and equal society, because it seems as though the dam has burst for the ability for people to control their emotions when they see, perhaps in far too great a number, the amount of injustice that has simply gone, unobserved, unpunished, ignored, and that's it.
Yeah, you say that, but Has it really? I mean, I know people are being more vocal, right? And people are definitely being more vocal, let's say, or on online, which doesn't require as much bravery,
Mm.
right? But and there's also sort of in certain cultures and political systems there has been revolution for sure, so people are pushing back, and that does require courage and bravery because they're really taking on a, you know, years of systematic abuse from governments and so on, and overturning them. And this me too, that requires bravery. Black Lives Matter requires bravery. But and so yes, there's a shift, but is it, I mean, sure, there's a shift in behavior and vocalizing injustice, but what's going to be the outcome? I don't really know what the outcome is, because right and wrong is a man-made thing, and who determines what's right and what's wrong?
The winner.
See, yeah,
Yeah, the unfortunate reality is indeed, the victor writes, as it were, the history or the story.
yeah, that's it. That's it. And the point is, where does that end up? That's what I'm interested in knowing. Where is that going to go in terms of the shift is necessary now because we're going through massive shifts technologically, culturally, spiritually. But where's it going? I don't know, and that's what I'm really interested in. I might not be old enough to see it through, but I'm very keen. I mean, do you read any books around this kind of stuff, apart from like,
Uh, Yeah, I'm kind of going through this phase where I'm really sticking to fiction and away from, because I see all of the politics and social studies that I need in the news, because it's no longer theoretical, it's
mm,
unfolding before our eyes. And whereas in the past you had to study these kinds of social shifts, I do believe we are in the throes, as you say, of a very a serious social change. And one of the principles which I remember about, for example, revolutions, is that you can start one, but you never know where it will finish.
yeah,
And that is essentially one of the key defining elements of a revolution. I mean, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke with Alvaro about the French Revolution, and this was a case in point, as in what they began when they stormed the Bastille, and then what happened at the end of it. I think were perhaps two completely different things.
yeah,
You know, and we don't want to see this mass violent revolution take place now, because people do still, I believe, generally find violence abhorrent. So we have a very reserved revolution. It's a very slow, subtle one with words, currently still being fought with words, even though there are instances of violence in some
well,
places.
I don't know, I don't necessarily agree with you, because when a strong leader comes up, like Trump, whether you like him or not, he can incite people to action. And so it actually only needs one individual to be able to galvanize violence. And that happens in pockets all over the place.
Yeah, you're right. And yeah, unfortunately, hatred is always there. You know, it is a constant which is simmering. But the thing is, I agree with you also what you said before. This concept of good and bad is completely wrong, because it only suggests that there are two possible options,
Yeah.
and I think that's just extremely limited and very two-dimensional. And so, there are always many options, many ways of resolving an issue, and, many types of hate. And what we see, for example, under what happened with Trump was, you didn't only have racists, you didn't only have people who were anti-Semitic, people who were
No,
conservative Christians. You had all of these people coming
yeah,
together, and
that's the worry. That's the
yeah.
point. That that people, individuals, can be led if that person that's leading them is strong enough and is single-minded enough, they can galvanize a body of people. That I mean, I find that fascinating, really. I find it fascinating because, and that's what you said about revolution. That's that's what happens because the galvanizing people to do things, you have to get them really emotionally committed. Yeah. And when you're talking about emotion rather than logic, that's when things happen that are unexpected because emotion becomes overwhelming. And when you're overwhelmed, you'll be doing things that you wouldn't have necessarily done had you not been in that state of being, you know?
Mm.
And so like, storming the Capitol, going in, starting to sit at the desk of, the speaker and those kind of things. I don't think they were expecting that they were going to end up doing that. They probably came as a surprise to them, even. But that mob emotion, that collective emotion, took them there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. I think the mob, as defined even in the times of Rome, if you control the mob and you control Rome,
Yeah,
as in, this idea has existed for a very long
yeah.
time. And, you're right, it is a powerful structure, a powerful social structure, because you feel untouchable, you know, going around the streets because there is no force to stop you.
So dial that back in to how you control people, for example. Emotions is the strongest methodology of controlling people. And then when you dial that back even further into how you are as an individual, if you can control your emotions, you can control your destiny. I think.
I hope so.
Well,
I
yeah.
hope so. They, it's fear and love. Are they not the two most? Should we say? Okay, you could also add hate, but hate is simply,
No, it's
the
yeah,
other form of the dial of love, isn't it? So,
yeah.
um, as it so love and fear are the two ways that society has to rule. You either follow somebody else because you are afraid of them, or you follow them because you love them and love what they represent. And yeah, unfortunately, yes, of course, exactly what you say. These are the emotions which rule us. Can we control that? But they say that you can't control your feelings.
Well, I think I probably can. I mean, isn't that what enlightenment is about? That's the whole point about spiritual enlightenment. It's about being able to master yourself. And the question now is whether the machine can actually start controlling you by controlling your emotions. So this is how, I mean, one of the questions that you sent to me was, okay, well, what, I mean, actually, I don't remember. Was it, I thought you had a question in there about technology. And I
Yes.
think, and how technology, what does technology look like? I mean, I can't answer that question. I have no idea, right? Because also the timeline of the technology and the adoption of technology. But I think we're so close to the ability for technology to help us feel things. And if that's the case, then if you project that out, you can control people by controlling their emotions. And if you can code that, then I mean, actually, I suppose that's no different to advertising when you think about it. That's how advertising works.
But when you were saying that, actually, I thought of something quite similar, in fact, as you say, to advertising, because, for example, I recently had a birthday and I got an email from Lidl, Manchester United, and these other things. I mean, yeah, Manchester. It's not as though Ole Gunnar Solskjaer sort of sends Zach a happy birthday message, and you're right. It's these kinds of this technology, whether it's hardware or software. For us, it doesn't really matter what kind of where it is. It's the result which we see. We are inclined to pursue those things which bring us pleasure. And so if you are on, I mean, I'm not particularly active on social media, but, you know, if you're somebody who is active on social media, you get all of these messages. Oh, you know, this person is here, he thinks you've done such a good job, and these people are looking at you, and, you know, do you want to respond to this person because, you know, she said something nice to you last week, you know, and then you're sort of being pushed to, you know, perpetuate these cycles.
Yeah, yeah. It's just basic human understanding. And what I love really is the fact that right now we're getting more and more insight into human behavior. And actually, what's also scary is that that's also being fed into, you know, all of the all this data about us and how we behave is being fed back into all the people that are promoting things to us. So whether you like it or not, I sort of like it because it just means that we can get to understand it. Because I still believe that humans have a choice in things. I don't think that everybody is just sort of blindly. I mean, they are. There's loads of people who are blindly walking around and letting things happen to them. But on the whole, we all have a choice. And actually, I like to know how people work, or how the science is. So I am on this sort of, I say mission, I'm not on a mission at all because I'm too lazy for missions, but I'm on this path of trying to understand how potentially I can master myself, because I'm constantly disappointed with myself, which actually probably goes back to why I'm driven in a way. But I'm, being driven is relative, isn't it? Because if I applied this much energy and I was smart, I could be a millionaire, or I could be, the president or whatever. And I'm not any of those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's also perhaps a question of will or need or desire, because you strike me as being one of those people who you sort of fasten onto an ambition, and then you set about fulfilling it. So, I mean, the immediate, as you were speaking earlier, the first thought that came to my mind was your drive, and then you mentioned it, so yeah, you are, clearly driven, because you do so much. You are, well, I mean, yeah, because I mean, this conversation is brilliant, and I'd like to continue it going, but I mean, can you tell us a bit more of what you do, because then people perhaps have an idea of exactly how much you do.
Yeah, sorry, it turned into a conversation, didn't it?
It's brilliant though. That's cool. That's how it's got to be.
So I run a PR agency, PR marketing agency, now, but I'm about to launch another business. My PR marketing agency focuses on technology companies, whether it's a startup business or whether it's an established market leader. But the focus is always technology. And I've been in technology all of my career, really. I've always, also my career, I guess I was sort of somehow thrown into sort of the technical part of tech. So I was always in somehow the innovative part of it. So I was lucky in that sense. And that has never, so technology has never been intimidating to me. And I'm really grateful for that, I suppose. So we effectively do mainly publicity, so public relations for pitching to journalists about product or services or people. But we also do all the related marketing services necessary, because now content is the core, and a story or a narrative, an engaging narrative, is at the core of everything relating to advertising and promotion. So we are being taken into, social media management, content creation, advertising online, whether it's Facebook, whether it's, banner ads, to creating messaging for every channel of communication that engages with the consumer, be it in B2B or in B2C space, which is really, I find, actually quite exciting. So the new business as well is relating to humans as well.
Can you talk about the new business as well, or is
Yeah,
it too soon?
I haven't launched it. No, it's not too soon. I mean, this is not rocket science. what I'm doing is I'm trying to find a way of making it easy for an individual to understand how to promote themselves. This was born out of finding that certain elements in society, specifically actually, 50 to 60-year-old white men who were finding themselves starting to become marginalized within the careers, because they were finding that they had had successful careers but hadn't managed to port their successes online. And this applies to mothers that might have been out of the workforce for a while, um, individuals that don't have confidence or are not technologically minded, because online is where you network now, really. And if you're not confident to be able to show up and represent yourself professionally, I'm talking about, not personally, represent yourself professionally in the most authentic way and probably in the most positive way, then you'll fall out of the running in your career very quickly. And I find that too sad, actually. So I'm trying to make a platform that's going to be easy for people to learn how to do that for themselves, but also at the top end of the service, probably to be able to outsource that to us to do for them. Because probably the easiest way to promote yourself is to get someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to do a better job of it than you yourself perhaps could, and
Yeah,
therefore,
sometimes.
yeah. Okay. So is this going to be? Is the idea of this to develop into a sort of large business platform, which essentially exhibits portfolios of people's abilities, which
No,
like recruiters will then come to, or is there a different idea to this?
no. The idea is that you personally will take responsibility for your PR. Um,
Okay.
so you'll determine what channels are going to be important to achieve the goals that you want, whether it's going to be career change, whether it's going to be a promotion, whether it's going to be um, actually you want to start your own business, or you want to be seen as an expert in a certain field. So you start writing papers if you're an academic and publishing them, but knowing how to make sure that they get seen by the right people. And there's an art in doing that because it's quite a noisy, on being online is very, very, very noisy, and I don't think
Mm.
everybody gets it.
Okay.
Do
Yeah.
you hear that beeping in the background? Do you mind if I?
Yeah. Do you wanna? Is that your watch or something?
No, no, actually, it's the oven. Hang on. Sorry,
That's okay.
I burnt my lunch, but that's all
No.
right.
No.
It's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. It's cool. It's good. Um, yeah. So I'm actually this is really exciting for me because PR is really not a very well understood discipline in marketing. It's interesting because I think I have to explain what PR is to a lot of people, even businesses, because they just don't really get the power of PR. And so if I'm able to really figuring out an easy way for just individuals to know how to brand themselves and PR themselves authentically, yeah, um, I think, I actually feel that that's going to talk into my purpose in life a little bit.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you think also perhaps people don't really truly recognize the need in this case? Because you, I mean, you always, for example, try to push yours truly into doing things to going that step further and to, for example, promote myself, as it were, in certain ways and in certain platforms. And I can only imagine that with people who are far more prominent in your sector, that you are even more so.
Well, you know, you you may not have a need. If you don't want to promote yourself, you don't need to, right? But I feel like there is a race that's happening. And if you're not part of that race, then you're going to fall out of that race completely. And I don't want people that actually have a lot of value to offer to do that. So I am driven to having people that I value, even whether I have a personal connection or not. I mean, in this context, I have a personal connection with you, and I care about you, and I think that you do have a lot of value. You just need a little bit of pushing sometimes.
Good
um,
old fashioned in size 9. Yeah.
exactly. Um, so, you know, but if you didn't want to do it, then you shouldn't be doing it. It's not about being forced to doing it. That's the key. The key is for you to feel authentic. I hate that word. I really hate that word. I haven't found a better word than that, because it does have to be something that you actually can connect with, not, a different version of you, because it's not, that's not sustainable. You can't fake it. I think lots of people can fake lots of different things, but that's the point. Is it's not
Mm.
about faking it.
Yeah, I think it's really it's intriguing because I from my own experience, I know, I would love to be, for example, either a radio show host at night, a bit like the Midnight Caller, Jack Killian style thing,
Yeah.
which is the inspiration in some ways behind what this is. Yeah, I would love that. In the same way when I was a kid and I would dream, or even now actually, I dream about when I play basketball, scoring that great the buzzer beater. It's never going to happen, but I can still dream of it. And so if pushed, to admit these things, I'll say, yes, of course, I'd love it. But sometimes I see um, the journey perhaps in itself being a bit of a barrier, so because I can't clearly see
Yeah.
the path between here and now and
Yeah.
that dream.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. So this is. I mean, if I realized, it's so, honestly, it's so basic. It's a bit like losing weight when you're really, really overweight. Actually, even when you're not really that overweight, okay? I've been trying to lose weight my whole life. I'm not even talking about my whole adult life. I'm talking about before then. Um, so, but if somebody had said to me, losing weight is not about feeling amazing straight after you've done one workout, if somebody had said that to me when I was younger, that realizing that actually everything is all about incremental gains, small incremental gains that compounded get you the result that you need. And it's about understanding those small gains. And it's a process and a journey. And if you commit to the process and journey, you get the results. So what happens is you're looking at it and you think, well, I'm not famous. I'm not going to, it's going to, the work that it's going to take to get me to be famous. For example, I know, not the, ignore the word famous, but, a successful talk show host, yeah, um, is too much. It's too overwhelming. And when you look at it like that, it absolutely is. And but what you realize is, including people that are 100% globally recognized, everything was incremental. Even Steve Jobs, I mean, you know, Steve Jobs talks about, you know, when he looks back at his career, it wasn't a linear thing. These things all get plotted out in different ways. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but that it's a culmination of the whole journey that gets you there. So what I'm trying to say is, first of all, what my business is going to do is to give you a path that is not intimidating to allow you to get there. What we will also do, because we're experts in it, just like if I was a diet coach, is give you a framework and then help you along that path. And the confidence that grows from achieving and gamifying that process, let's call it, um, getting to, you know, step number one or step number two, it's that confidence that gets you to the end result. But everything requires commitment. If I commit to losing weight, I'll lose weight. But I still need a framework, and I still need to be able to understand that step one leads to step two. And then when I get to step two, I'm going to feel like this. And then I'm prepared to feel like this. And then I think, oh yeah, okay, I can see myself getting to step four now and see myself getting to step five. But when you're at ground zero, you can't even see step five. You can only deal with step one and step two. And somebody has to help you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I once heard also somebody in a sort of TED talk. You should do a TED talk, by the way. You've probably done one, no, you, but
I
you
have
should.
not
You,
done one.
yeah,
It's so
okay.
funny. I have nothing to share, let alone go on a TED talk.
But there was somebody talking about agile. Yeah, the theme was agile, and they said agile. It's, you know, it's not this huge monumental shift. It's exactly what you said. It's these little achievable steps which allow you to slowly but surely affect change within an organization. And you're essentially taking this sort of slowly but surely structured, agile approach with individuals for achieving a certain goal, it seems.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Because we've learned, we have understood the psychology more now in terms of achieving goals. It's all this whole, there's so much data now about why individuals don't and can't keep to their New Year's resolutions, right? Because random resolution, whenever you're feeling shit, forgive my French,
That's fine. We love French.
they don't work because there's no structure and there's no plan to achieving the goal. God, honestly, have you heard of Blinkist, by the way?
Uh, yeah, but please tell me more about it, if because I may have misconstrued the complete element. Or is it Blinkist? Is this where you pretend you can see something but you can't?
No,
Or
no, 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 no. Sorry, Blinkist is an app. Actually, it's an app
oh,
that is it abridges uh, non-fiction books into audio. Um, and so what you get is, it's not an audio book, it's an abridged audio version of the book, which I'm
okay.
which I'm sure writers hate, but it helps you go through lots and lots of non-fiction books really quickly to get the basic, you know, beans. Um, so, but if you go to Blinkist, Blinkist is brilliant, by the way. So you can go on a walk for 10 minutes, and you've listened
Read
to,
read 8 books.
yeah.
Okay.
But if you look up time management or goal setting or goal achieving or habit forming, oh my God, the amount of books on there. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. Same as dieting, right? There's a gazillion ways to hack and lose weight or whatever. And it's a huge industry. But actually, it's understanding the psychology of the individual. And once the individual commits to something, really like viscerally commits to something, then they will never achieve anything. But they do need to have that visceral commitment plus a process or a framework that works for them. If that those two things coupled together will enable anyone to achieve anything, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the problem for some people is, a lot of these sort of psychological self-help books do tend to regurgitate certain things, and people perhaps have heard this kind of sentence, this inspirational line, so often now that they probably think to themselves, yeah, but if everybody achieved everything that they wanted or that they could achieve, then the entire world would be complete, or full of overachievers. But again, that's also not the case, is it? Because not everybody really wants to actually achieve something. Sometimes for them, it's enough to know that they could if they chose
Exactly.
to.
Exactly. So actually that goes back to choice. That's my point. My point is you don't have to be famous if you don't want to be famous, actually. You don't
Mm.
really have to lose weight if you're happy with the way you are. So that is about self-awareness and understanding. But the framework for achieving things, it's a science. So you have to understand your own motivation and whether you actually want to or you don't want to.
Mm.
100%. That's the basis of everything.
Well, this is the commitment you were alluding to earlier, isn't it? That's the path. You stay the path, as it were.
That's all it is, yeah. But what I didn't know, and I know I'm sure everybody else did, and I didn't, is that the path that actually achievement aren't big leaps. They're never big leaps. They're tiny little steps that culminate into eventually being a big leap. And I didn't get that before. So that's a revolution for me.
Mm.
And I love that actually. And it makes me feel a lot better about being where I am because I've just been wasting time, in my opinion.
But can you actually consider it wasting time? I mean, because we've talked about path here, you've mentioned enlightenment, and the path to enlightenment, it's not a well-trodden one, nor is it an illuminated roadway. We all have to find our own way there. For some people, it's they're born with enlightenment. For others, they strive all of their lives and never quite achieve it. So, doesn't enlightenment come to you at the time it should do?
Oh, oh. Mm, no, I don't. I don't think so. I don't think you're. I don't. Are we born with enlightenment? I think we're born. I think we're born. Getting a bit deep, aren't we? But I think we're born with no expectations, no real understanding. Well, open, let's call it, and maybe that's the closest state of being enlightened. Um, but no, I don't think enlightenment comes to you whenever. I think it comes to you when you're ready, but I'm not sure that it comes to you without work, without commitment, without some, yeah, without work.
Mm.
I'm sure somebody more enlightened than me, because I certainly am not enlightened, can answer that question. But I don't think anything just comes in a sense. I think you have to. I think you have to somehow either desire it or be part of the manifestation process. Maybe that answers your question as to why I'm driven.
Yeah.
I suppose I think things don't just happen.
No, I think you're driven I think it's a personality thing. I think you have a certain way of analyzing situations, and I think you have had these kinds of skills. Perhaps you've been aware of them for some time. Perhaps that they were just natural to you at certain points in your life. But you've made decisions, and these were perhaps based on observations that you and reflections, and then you've just gone ahead and pursued those. As in, I'm pretty sure when you've taken a step, it's been deliberate, at least after a certain point in your life, and that's what makes you driven. So I don't think you're an accidental hero or heroine, if you prefer to use that term. I think you're very deliberate in that way. But yeah, that's my assessment of you.
Interesting, isn't it? Because I
Mm.
actually don't think I do a lot of thinking at all. And that's what I meant by I think I've wasted a lot of time. Because I think that when you become deliberate, then you can achieve a lot. But your view of me is so different to my view of me, which is interesting in itself. And that's I like it, obviously. Thank you. um, yeah. But anyway, the point is there is science behind it. Really, there is science behind it. And once that science is understood and uh, uh, applied individually, i.e., some self awareness and some retrospection is um, created, i.e., I'm starting to actually think about, I'm not being blind about my life. I'm actually starting to think about why I make the choices that I make and how I might be able to change that direction for myself. Um, you feel more powerful. You feel more powerful. Actually, you know, this is my point about everyone has a choice to determine whatever outcome they want. This is not a self help or, motivational speak. This is science. I consider this to be science. And now that even people are understanding more about the science behind mindfulness and meditation, it's becoming more and more apparent that if you don't practice mindfulness and meditation, you can't create new outcomes in your life because your brain, your synapses, the pathways are all ingrained. And so, therefore, there will always be a repetition of behavior. You can't get new behavior because your brain doesn't function that way. You haven't given your brain a new pathway.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating what you say, and it also throws a question at me, which is there in some way a certain part of that sentiment which would avail itself of a a communal, a social step forward, where there is a collective move towards not only improving the existence or the life of the individuals, for example, who would take advantage of this offering, but also elevate those of the people around them, as a step forward as a
There is.
community.
Yeah, there is. Because there's lots and lots of community structures that are doing this in many, many, many different ways. And some of it partly sometimes can be in the structure of religion, by the way. Um, the point is whether you want to be part of a community or whether you're doing this individually, an element of self-awareness has to be part of the process. And understanding that you sort of have to be doing something else or creating new experiences for yourself in order to have or change the experience that you're currently going through. So, if you apply this, for example, to creating opportunities for young girls, let's say. Um, okay, let's take Black Lives Matter as an example. Black Lives Matter is a movement. And now there's been a shift in society to understand actually that it's not about all lives matter, but Black lives actually matter. And you have to put an emphasis on that. And part of the outcome of that has been to have more Black people, more different cultures of different ethnicities be involved in more mainstream things. And on TV now, you see more representation of Black people. In in business talks, you see more representation in Black people, and one of the reasons for that is because they're creating a whole new vision. They realize that actually a child cannot be inspired to think differently for her life, if she can't see something different, if she can't relate to something different. Who was it that said, if you can't see it, you can't be it? I think it was.
Mm.
I think it was the Yahoo CEO. Forgotten her name now. She's not at Yahoo anymore. She's somewhere else. But um, it's creating a different experience. So if you think you have an 8-year-old, Jamaican girl now, she's having a completely different experience to her 30-year-old mother who was born in this country. And she's seeing more role models that she can aspire to be like. Oh, I mean, take Biden's, um, uh, you know,
Oh, his vice president, Kamala
yeah,
Harris. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, gosh, overnight, that woman
Mm.
has created a whole, globally has changed the life of many, many, many young girls of color.
Have you read Hidden Figures?
I haven't read it. No, I saw the movie.
Okay, I haven't seen a movie, so I'm not sure if the movie covers all of the elements of the book. And the book is fantastic. And there's one part where the author tells a story of Uhura. You know, in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know the name of the actress, but Uhura, fantastic actress, obviously. And she goes to some convention, and at the convention, one of the organizers says, "Can I introduce you to your biggest fan?" And Uhura, she's telling the story later on. She says, "I was expecting some child to be presented to me, and it was Martin Luther King."
Wow.
Yeah, and she was completely flabbergasted. And apparently, a couple of days before this particular meeting, she had said to Gene Roddenberry that she wants to leave Star Trek at the end of the season because she wants to go to Broadway. And she tells this because she thought, oh God, how can I, because Martin Luther King is here and he's saying that I'm his favorite. How can I
No.
walk away from here without telling him I've actually quit? And so she tells him, and he said, no, you can't. And she's really disappointed at this. She said, what do you mean I can't? And he says, you are one of the most important symbols because you represent a future where it's natural for Black people to be in a position of authority, to sit and converse equally among the management of the Starship Enterprise, to speak to Spock and the others as an equal. Um, you can't imagine how important your role is. And apparently, Martin Luther King only really watched Star Trek because of Uhura. He didn't watch anything else at the time. So
Wow.
what you're saying is exactly that. And obviously, Uhura went back to Gene Roddenberry a couple of days later and said, "Actually, I'm going to stay on," and she stayed on.
Yeah. And you see, this is what's nice actually, because it gave her purpose actually. And when she connected with that purpose, it made a big difference to the enjoyment of that activity. But
Sure.
I think within people of color, within Black leaders, there's been a huge lack actually of enough representation. But I was watching a documentary about um, uh, a singer, Black singer in France. She was American actually. She became really famous in France, but
Mm.
was rejected by her own people. Josephine Baker, that's it, in the 20s. Um, and how it took her a whole lifetime really to connect with a higher purpose and identifying that with actually her skin color, but and then finally was able to be of use to her own, well, accepted by her own people, but also be of use to them in the end, because she became part of the French resistance and was able to help a lot of people. But to begin with, she didn't want to have anything to do with it because she was being successful, but didn't really want to be representing people of color and trying to take their, you know, change lives of any other people of color. Strangely. anyway,
Yeah.
got digressed. I don't even know.
It's a pressure though, isn't it? No, but I mean, what you've brought up here is also a question I wanted to ask you. I've asked lots and lots of people who I've spoken with, and you know, so you mentioned science, obviously technology. You know, these are the first two elements of STEM, yeah, engineering and
Yeah.
mathematics. These are places which are considered, yeah, the dominions of men. How have you managed to operate in the way that you have, with the gusto, you know, that you possess, and you continue to sort of push forward in such a male-dominated sector? What's your secret?
Um, hmm. Well, I feel a bit of I feel a bit sort of um, a bit of an imposter when when I'm asked this question, because my route in technology wasn't through engineering and mathematics. Okay, so it wasn't through academia, and now, by the way, there's growing numbers, so the gap is definitely starting to become smaller. And I have been active in that community myself in terms of in terms of some of the work and the mentorship that I've been doing. But to answer your question, I didn't I didn't have a really um, what's the word, purposeful way of getting through it. I just got through it. I didn't let it stop me though. But if you ask me what was the secret, my secret wasn't so much of a secret. But what I didn't do is I didn't shy away from being feminine, but equally, I didn't allow my femininity to be abused. Um, so, what I was definitely aware of was the fact that I was a woman and there was a lot of men around, and I did get a lot of male attention. But luckily or not, I didn't participate in that. And I was very much victimized. Oh my God, I got so many stories about that, so many stories that we sort of, from my generation, used to sort of put up with. I mean, in one context in my career, I had men, middle-aged men working for me um, when I was in my late 20s. And they didn't like that at all. I mean, God, the things they used to make up about me was ridiculous. But I was lucky because my boss believed in me and he gave me the opportunity. So I was lucky because I had someone that believed in me who was in a position of authority. And that was just luck, I suppose. Um, but if I didn't have the ability, I wouldn't have been able to make it through. So I put my head down and I got on with it. And I tried to ignore the people around me and what and how they were behaving. That would be, I guess, the secret, if you ask me, to really sort of, tone it down. But yeah, I mean, I was treated terribly when I was younger, and the amount of sexual predators, my God, and what they thought they could get away with. But what was sad actually is my generation almost accepted that that was okay, and we were somewhat numb to it. And I'm really grateful now to have the ability to look at it and say, yeah, that's not okay actually, and it wasn't okay then. Whether I would have been brave enough to have fought against it at the time or not, I don't know. But I'm lucky enough to have not had anything really bad happen to me in the workplace that I couldn't just um, ignore and get on with.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, you know, people such as, you know, you in your generation have sort of, you know, made a path, in some ways, at least for the current generation, to, you know, to walk it a bit more easily. And yet, even so, despite that, we still see a world, you know, replete with this kind of sexism. People still feel they can get away with, you know, saying things, doing things in some cases. But there is now more pushback. There's now more support. There's now a greater understanding of the needs of these kinds of horrific situations. Would you say that this is because younger women are now braver? They now trust in these various elements of their organizations to represent their needs?
I don't know. I think that still comes down to the individual and the context, because I think people are being abused all over the place all the time still, and so I can't say that. I think there's a lot of work. I mean, the anti-slavery activities. That's people smuggling. There's abuse all over the place, and it's still very well hidden. Within the workplace, however, there's more awareness, and I'm grateful for that. And so young women should be able to progress more in their career, and I'm seeing it happening all the time, and it's very encouraging, without having to face any discrimination because of their gender. I also see that my generation of women are bringing up their children differently, including the boys. And actually, it's that that's making the difference, because the boys that are growing into the workplace now have a different view of women. That's what's making the real difference, because the dinosaurs at the top are still there, and they still do it, and they do it in a very hidden way. Basically, whether they get caught or not, that's still happening. But they're going to be, they're growing too old now to be in the workplace, so it's good, and they'll just be, they're being unearthed slowly, but some of them will just sort of be too old to be in the workforce, and then they'll go and cause havoc somewhere else, probably in their own family, abusing their women or whatever, sadly. But I think there is more courage to voice, primarily as well because of, unfortunately, society always has to have a structure there to support people, and actually having some form of penalty in place where police are starting to understand emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and being able to know what the difference is, that also helps too, because there is a form of recrimination if you act that way. The structure is being put in place to be able to penalize you, like revenge porn, or like online trolling, for example. So hopefully that's all going to weed these people out.
Absolutely, absolutely, and also the sort of developing levels of legislation with regards to controlling social media platforms. Obviously, that has to be balanced against freedom of speech and so on. But hopefully, at least those elements which are threatening to vulnerable elements of society, hopefully it is, as you say, a progressing and developing area.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also cultural. It's also cultural. People have to be, it's very sad, but culturally, some women have to be taught what the difference is between abuse and control and care. They can't tell the difference. I couldn't when I was younger. It's very sad. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done still. I mean, this is a long. I mean, this answer is very different to what you asked me about STEM, but it all goes down to the fact that that society has to support change, not just individuals understanding what's right and wrong as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Maggie, I tell you, I wish I could speak with you for hours and hours and hours. I have a feeling, though, that people's concentration levels aren't quite what they were.
No way. No one's ever going to listen to this. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sure that let's do it. They'll just have to do it in 2 or 3 parts. That's the benefit of podcasts. There are so many other issues that I'd like to talk with you about, and I know how hard it is to be able to find the time. But maybe I don't know, in a couple of months we can get back together again and talk about some more stuff. Would that be all
Yeah,
right?
that'd be great. It's nice to be able to just shoot shit.
Cool. Love it. All right, my dear. Thank you very much. Your input is brilliant as always. And now hopefully a few more people will benefit from some of the things you have to say, because I'd always sort of selfishly hoarded all of the things that you said. And so
Thank
now
you for even considering me. I really appreciate
it's impossible not to do so.
it.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you. So,
Speak to you soon.
yeah,
Bye bye.
bye.